Hello and welcome to another Cloud Podcast, a podcast designed to bring you stories from the smartest minds in IT, operations, and business, and learn how they're using cloud technology to improve business and the customer experience. Dave, I just realized you've been with Interactive Intelligence / Genesis for almost 16 years.
Yeah, that's true. It's over 40% of my life, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. So longer than the time from preschool through senior year of high school, or even at this point it's like kindergarten through college, I guess. Yeah, it's crazy. I never intended to be here this long, but
right?
There's always a new job on the horizon. I've not been in the same position longer than 2 or 3 years, as we've gone through it. So there's always something new and fun to do. Yeah, it's been great.
I think about how much technology has changed over 16 years. And like when you first started with Interactive, how all premise based cloud was something that you hear about every so often. And all of a sudden it's like now where we're at, where it's Genesis Cloud, and it's how it's just changed exponentially since the beginning of your career. It's pretty crazy.
I mean, right now there's obviously we're already knee deep in cloud, but the past 4 or 5 years have been the whole prim to cloud thing, right?
Yeah.
When I first started, it was moving from traditional telephony to voice over IP. So voice over IP was this newfangled thing. So at Interactive, when I first started, everyone bought a server that had an Aculab or Dialogic board in it, which was like $30,000 just for the card to go into the server. And you would plug T1s or PRI straight into the back of a rack-mounted server, and that's how the telephony worked. It was all traditional telephony. And then they started getting gateways and converting to SIP and voice over IP and whatnot. But yeah, at the beginning, you were debugging like the D channel on a T1. It was pretty crazy.
I heard from a Genesis team member that you guys do, and I don't know if it's every year or every 2 years, but you guys do a development hackathon, and the developers get to mess with the tool and play and build like whatever they want. And some of the things that come out of it are kind of off the wall and wacky. Do you know about it? And the follow-up question is, what's the craziest, weirdest thing you've seen so far?
So I'm aware of it. It's not something that I'm too closely involved with or have seen much. I have heard that we've shortened roadmap items substantially by the hackathon. So product management might see, oh gosh, it's going to take us 2 years to develop that. And then they put a couple developers in a room, with some pizzas, and they come out, of a hackathon and probably don't have a go-to-market product yet, but they figure out, how to develop some of these new features. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I can't believe how much code has been written on just coffee and pizza. Late night hackers.
Yeah, I mean, that's even, bringing up a competitor, but that's how TalkDesk got started, right? It was just a hackathon type of thing that the founder did, and they're like, you should create a business around this. And next thing you know, they're, a viable competitor in the market for contact center. But I think what sets Genesis apart is that you guys came from that prem world. You have a lot of clients that are still in that premise world, but you've been able to see the evolution and been able to take those best practices over into the cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess for me, coming from Interactive initially, it was kind of being a software company when everyone else was a telecom company. So before it was all about circuits and routing calls and whatnot. And Don Brown, who founded Interactive, was like, well, why don't we just get a generic Windows server and write some software to do all this, right? And of course, it was premise-based at that point in time, but using software instead of all these heavy-duty switches for telco to route a call to the proper person was kind of a novel idea at the time. And then now, of course, it's all transitioned fully to the cloud.
So Artie, I had a couple questions. So I went and did some research. I went on to Contact Center Pipeline, and they have the biggest challenges for 2021 or the top priorities for 2021. I've got a top 3, but since you're in the mix with Textile, what would you say for you guys, and maybe even some of the clients that you've worked with as a consultant, are the top challenges that you see for moving forward this year in the contact center world?
Yeah, a lot. And you'll hear buzzwords a lot. You'll hear migration to the cloud. You'll hear AI and chatbots, automation, self-service. But What I've seen, or at least what I've seen with my peers, is, and every time this topic comes up, we try to break out and have little round tables, either digitally in an online community, or when we did have conferences, we'd sit down at conferences and literally sit down and talk through them. We call them bird of a feather round tables, where we all have a common mindset and a common goal, and we just want to pick each other's brain. A lot of it is migration to the cloud. So getting off of on-prem, getting into like a cloud ecosystem where you could have open APIs to integrate third parties, or go into a third party marketplace and quickly enable without having to do any heavy lifting or have a team of people write code. So that's a goal for a lot of people. That's like the biggest challenge if you haven't migrated to the cloud. For the people who have migrated to the cloud, and this is probably like number 2 and number 3 on this list, automation, self-service, and categorizing the customer intents. So when people are contacting you, what are they asking? And one person may ask it one way and another person may ask it a completely different way, but it's the exact same thing, and you could service them with the same results automatically, or you can route them to an agent who's skilled to answer both or either types of questions. So that's kind of at the top of the list there. And then the last one, if you've mastered that and you figured that out and you're in the cloud and you've got your intent mapping screen, you've got kind of chat bots and all that stuff, then it gets a little bit more technical, a little bit harder, which is bullseye routing. So how do I get the customer, now that you know who they are, where they're calling from, all of this information about what they're trying to solve for, how do you get it to the one person out of the 100 people in your call center or 1,000 people in your call center that has the right answer, is most equipped to answer it and can answer it the quickest, and have first call or first contact resolution, so they don't have to, the customer doesn't have to call back. So how do you use machine learning, AI, algorithms to get that match? It's kind of like Match.com. It's like, how do you, or like Tinder or any of the dating like websites, like how do you find that perfect match? And then once you route it, if it was successful, then keep using that algorithm. It'll start to learn and get better. If it doesn't, then mark that as a failed experiment and then move on and try something else. But yeah, those are the 3 that I've heard about, and they all center around migrating to the cloud, making it easier, chatbot, self-service, and how do you route or do predictive routing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, the top priority that they have here is implement and improve self-service, right? So it's right on point, as far as getting that customer experience to happen quickly. Dave, at Genesis, you guys see a lot of customers coming on board, and you've seen a lot, whether they're coming from an existing cloud provider or even just coming off a premise-based system. Like, when you guys have those clients come across, do you see it being a lot of self-service, or is it more, we just need a better system because this antiquated premise-based system just isn't getting us what we need? It's almost like the first jump into the cloud, and they're not quite to the second step, which is self-service and AI. Like, where do you see people jumping in, and what's the main reason for that?
Yeah, I'd say it's all across the board. I mean, we migrate very sophisticated customers to Genesis, and we migrate complete greenfield customers, or customers that are on a really outdated legacy system. So one of the tools that we use is what we call the CX maturity model. And so we try and understand, on their journey from being extremely simplistic and just having to put out technology fires toward, all the way toward offering, the ultimate customer experience. Where are they on that journey? And try and kind of dive in and figure out, well, what's the next natural step? I mean, some people, it's just having a system that's available 24/7. Like, that's the next natural step for them, right, based on where they're at. A more mature customer takes that for granted, and that's kind of table stakes, and they're looking to really utilize AI and bots and really automate and move into self-service. So it's really all across the board, and that's kind of what's exciting, because every customer is definitely in a different place on their journey for CX.
Absolutely. And that's what we've seen as far as like where the customer, we had one recently at RDI, we were working on, where they had one side of the business was on Vonage, the other side of the house was on a ShoreTel system. So they kind of had that, they know about the cloud on one end, but the other end, they're like, they've had a ShoreTel for 15 years, and now all of a sudden they're getting rid of a cloud and they're getting rid of a prem and they're going to Genesis in this case. And I think what's hard for the operations person that we're working with is she wants to be able to take advantage of all the cloud has to offer, right? And the first step was, and already explained this, was like, it's that crawl, walk, run approach where let's just crawl into the cloud, get it set up, get it working. And then that's where that next step of that CX journey is, okay, now what's the next step that they can take to get them to start taking advantage of all these bells and whistles? I mean, it seems like it's endless between the app stores and between all the AI available. And then you almost need just a full business assessment to figure out what's going to be the next best step in that journey, for sure.
Oh yeah, what I've seen is people who migrate from on-prem to the cloud, they have limitations with their on-prem tool set. So they've built all these weird workarounds and they have 800 different flows and they don't have the ability to do like variables or like a simple data lookup or data dip or, you know, just some basic tools that come out of the box with a lot of the cloud-based solutions that are out there today. So when they get a cloud-based platform like Genesis Cloud, for example, it's like they went from like a broken down like Pinto to like a rocket ship, and they're like they want to do everything all at once, and you have to slow them down and say, okay, you started with crawling, and you can't go to a full sprint. You can't be, you know, trying out for the Olympics, try to win the race. You have to slow it down. You have to convert what you have into the next phase and the next phase and the next phase. And then eventually you can get to AI, automation, self-service, all these cool and robust tool sets. But you got to kind of temper yourself and make sure you don't run too fast.
I completely agree with that. It's interesting because when we speak to a potential client, you know, one of the first things I'll always ask is, how quickly can you implement us? And I'm like, well, two questions. One is, what's your definition of implemented? You know, because how far do you need to be? What's your, I hate using MVP, but what's your, you know, minimum viable product for go live? And then two, how much time do you have to dedicate? Because a lot of it's not just deploying technology, it's revamping internal processes and making them more efficient. And I think a lot of customers don't realize, well, number one, the opportunity that they have to make things more efficient, but number two, just how much thought they have to put into it. You know, what do they want the experience to be like? It's pretty quick to configure the experience, really, these days with cloud, but deciding what you want it to be like is kind of the first step that can be time consuming.
And Alex, I got a question for you. I want to switch gears just a little bit, but you talk to a lot of people and you help them and you consult them. And sometimes you're talking to internal IT teams. You're talking to the CIO, CTO. You're talking to people who are very technical. Maybe they don't oversee a call center or a contact center, but what they may not realize is that they do have a call center. They may have a help desk. They may have, you know, some sort of team, even a front desk at an office with 4 people who answer the, you know, the phone number, the main phone number to the front line. So how do you help them realize that they need not just a PBX or some sort of, you know, cloud-based UCaaS or unified communications as a service tool, and they really need some sort of queuing tool like Genesis? How do you pull that out, or what questions do you ask to get to that level of the conversation?
When we start working with the IT, whether it's a director or VP and even CIO, like you mentioned, what happens is, if they're not aligned with the business side of the company, with operations or possibly even sales and finance, HR, is that, hey, we have an old PBX, it's not working, we're all work from home now, forwarding to the cell phones doesn't work, we need a new system. And we'll tease out if there's a contact center in there, but a lot of times they haven't even considered the other business units. They're just looking to replace this old system. And so the most important part is, first off, like, help us understand like your process. How do customers reach you? How do you reach your customers? Is there, you know, a database that you're using to keep all your customer contact info in? And so that's where we start to get them to think outside of, this is more than just replacing dial tone, moving into the cloud because it has a mobile app or because it has collaboration built in. And so that's where we start to get them thinking a little bit differently, and ultimately bringing in the other, you know, stakeholders in those in those opportunities. And we just had one from last year up in Northern California. And it wasn't a huge contact center, it was 20 seats, but they had Salesforce. And originally it started off with, we just need a new phone system. And then what really drove the project was the contact center. The dial tone's dial tone when it came to like what they needed there. And so really the winning carrier won it because of the contact center, not because they provided dial tone and some collaboration. And so that's really where bringing in the other, stakeholders from those departments makes a huge difference. And a lot of times in the mid-market, even smaller, they're just so siloed, they don't talk to each other. And a lot of IT professionals don't make those connections right away. The CIOs typically do. If you're a big enough company to have the CIO, they're talking with other business units a lot of times. But what's typically driving the project is going to be that operations side, where it's, hey, like, we're changing a phone system. You didn't tell us, like, here's what we need. And then you bring in all these other requirements, and carrier A that normally would have fit, like, this isn't even close to a fit anymore. Now we have to start looking over here, because the contact center, in my opinion, is extremely, like, way more important than just a regular PBX in the cloud. You call it UCAS, right? And so that's what we see, and it's just really getting alignment with those stakeholders. Dave, what do you see? I guess, flipping it over to you, like, you have 8 to 10 reps on your team that you work with. Like, what are they seeing, and how are they getting alignment with those on those?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a dramatic shift over the past couple of years. Again, not to keep mentioning the cloud, but it's causing the buyer to now be, the business operations, not IT. So it used to be a big infrastructure. We're changing out the phone system. We're physically removing servers and putting new ones in, and we're depreciating them off the books, and we have this much budget, that whole thing. And it's really moved from that, to more of a operational expense of the business itself. And it's way more fun to talk to the business, because you learn about actual challenges, how they're trying to service their customers versus, hey, it's fun to say you don't have to patch a bunch of servers and stuff, but right. How do I efficiently route my customers, get them answers fast, boost my CSAT or NPS score, while I'm doing it. So a lot more to talk about on the business side versus just uptime and servers and things like that on the IT side.
What's nice on the business side too is typically they can get more budget if they can make that case to the CFO or through the different business units, because you look at sales departments, they spend a ton of money on tools for their agents, whether it's Bombora or 6 Sense or all these other, add-ons to help them sell better. Well, now here's a SaaS product essentially as an add-on to help with the customer experience. And so it's nice with the IT, it doesn't have to come out of their budget. If they can position it right and say, well, the budget can be split, right? Half the cost maybe goes towards operations, the other half goes towards IT budget. And then it becomes a much more feasible project for even IT to push through and get other stakeholders bought into that, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a lot more of an exercise in calculating an ROI versus just a TCO, right? So we're looking at a lot of the soft savings now, becoming more efficient. What are the savings behind that? Becoming more productive. What are the savings behind that versus just, how many dollars does it cost to put this box and this license in place?
Yeah, you mentioned, so productivity, that's a big one, right? And I think even when I was looking at the contact center article here, it's, figuring out where to take that, right? And how to get that, how do you monetize that, or how do you put those to numbers, that productivity that they're going to gain by moving to a new system. And like in your case, are there spreadsheets you guys use? Like, what's the process for getting those soft costs onto paper to prove that ROI out?
Yeah. So we actually have a web-based tool now. So we've got a business consulting group that's focused solely on ROI and value add, right? So an example would be, self-service, right? Let's look at, obviously everyone knows in the contact center, the most expensive component is the people, right? So how much time are you spending answering monotonous calls, password resets, send me this form, repetitive things. And then, using that to say, okay, well, let's automate some of those things and look at the savings, with your people of not doing those. And it's kind of twofold the advantage. Not only are you not spending money on your resources to do these monotonous tasks, but you're also reserving resources for the complicated tasks, because self-service is great, but there's always going to be a type of call or a type of communication where you need a human touch, you need that extra help, and it's so much better where you can have your business using your employees to service those sorts of tasks, rather than the repetitive ones. So yeah, we've made a whole tool out of that, around self-service, around workforce engagement, automation, around the scheduling. That's where a lot of savings are as well. Staffing the queues appropriately, not overstaffing. And there's a lot of savings to be found that basically can make the system pay for itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And Artie, I'm going to ask a question for you, since you're knee deep with agents in a large contact center. According to what I was reading, so agent attrition seems to always be a top struggle. So in your year, like 12 plus years of experience in contact center, what have you seen as ways to retain agents and keep them happy and keep them engaged, so that HR isn't always having to spin up new ones and losing all that precious time?
Yeah, so everyone who's listening to this call who has worked in the contact center world probably already knows this. I'm not saying anything new, but for anyone who hasn't, attrition, for a contact center is anywhere from 5 to 20%, year over year, sometimes even month over month, which is pretty horrible. And that means that you have to, if you're not growing as a contact center, you have to always be recruiting. I was a team lead of 20 people, then became a senior manager of 200, and then became a senior director of 2,000. Half of my time was interviewing people, whether it was the initial or final interview, depending on where I was in my career. And it was just to replace the amazing talent that was going out the door. And the reason, at least in my opinion, the reason why people would leave or agents would leave, because we would do exit interviews as well too. We would ask them, why are you leaving? What can we do better for the next person to come into this ecosystem? It really falls into kind of 3 categories, and it's the ones you all have heard of a million times. But it's the people, the process, and the product. So I'll work backwards. Product. If you have technology that's really hard for them to complete their job, they're going to hate their job. So if it's hard, they have to click 12 buttons to do something when it really should only be 1, they're going to hate their job because they have to do that 40 times a day, 10 times an hour, or whatever that is. So that, excuse me, so that's the technology or product side. The process side is, if you don't have good training, if you don't have good career development, if you don't have the ability for an agent or a team member to get off of the phone and talk to a supervisor in person about a really bad or hard call that they had, if you don't facilitate the process behind your headcount, you're gonna imprison them, or we like to call it leash them, because we all have leashes now to our computers. Leash them to the computer and leash them to the queue, and they will feel like they're trapped. So make sure that you open up your processes to allow for your employees to really expand and grow. And then the last one is the people. You gotta hire the right people in the beginning. No one goes to college and says, I'm gonna major in answering customer service calls. No one does that. There's no one. This is a industry, at least in America. Other countries are different. Some countries people love and prescribe and will have careers out of that because that's what they enjoy. But in America, it's usually not the thing you go home and tell grandma about. Like, grandma will ask you, what do you do for a living? Oh, I work at a call center. What do you do? I take customer service calls. I've done it for 10 years. It's not something that you brag or you wear a badge about. So with your people, you have to make sure that you foster not only the image that they are the powerhouse, they are the voice, the ears, and the eyes of the customer. You have to make sure that they feel empowered, so that when they come to work, they're not feeling like they are the bottom of the totem pole. They always get the last perk in the business. Sales always gets the cool parties and all the recognition, and I get nothing because all I do is answer the phone. So you have to make sure that you have a good, strong group of people and support them in that.
That's really interesting. And we talked a lot about the product, right? With Genesis and the cloud platforms, but really that's just one of the 3 legs that really make a good contact center, a good customer experience, and call center, right? Contact center. So Dave, like what let's give an example of like a great company. Like what company have you guys worked with, or maybe in the past that you can at least say, or example that had the people and the process down well, that where you said, wow, they've got it really figured out based off of the culture in the company, and what did they do differently? If you can't say the name, but what did they do that really stood out to you?
Oh man, some of the more exciting companies that I've worked with are in the mortgage industry, right? They really treat their reps well because they are a direct driver of revenue, and so there's a lot of gamification before that was even a term, right? So whoever's answering the most calls and whoever's processing the most leads or the most deals, they were already years ago tracking things like that on whiteboards, on screens, but it really wasn't that term, gamification. And now the product has that all built in, right? So finding ways that have been proven and done, without software in the past, but having the product do that and recognize, top performers and have, employees challenge one another to drive the whatever metric it might be. So that's one, I guess, industry that we've seen that already had the culture and already had the people, and then the product has really enhanced that even further.
Yeah, I bet in the mortgage industry, they're hiring competitors, right? People that want to like win, and it's very revenue driven. I think the challenge is probably for the companies where it's more customer support, less revenue driven, right?
Yeah.
So like the sales contact center is easy to gamify, right? Or easy because they're driving revenue for the company. But then there's the other types of customer service where it's all they're doing is fielding complaints. Well,
Yeah.
we work in telecom. Everyone knows that the telecom industry, the cable company, or the big one, the big Ma Bells, right? No one wants to call them because they've merged 100 times and they don't know one side of the business from the other when you call in. And so I think it's hard as a contact center, right? If you're on the customer support side where you're fielding complaints all the time, how do you keep people there motivated, right? And then how's the company culture, like is that driving towards giving someone a feel good experience? Last week Artie and I were talking about Zappos and how great they were at supporting calls and doing like bending over backwards and doing just oddball things to make the customer experience really stand out. Artie, what have you seen as far as like company, because you've dealt a lot on the consulting side, on the outside, on really building up on the people and that.
Yeah, we've touched on a couple major topics here, and I'll answer your question with another question because I'm going to defer to Dave because I want to hear his opinion on it. But Dave, we've talked about kind of the buzzwords in the last decade and a half. I'll frame it up before I ask the question, but the buzzwords in the last maybe 15, 20 years in the contact center world have been gamification, customer satisfaction, so CSAT, and those are kind of separate bubbles, and then self-service and automation. So out of those three things, which 90% of the contact center world, they don't have those, or they have maybe just one of those. For someone who's maybe listening who doesn't have one of those, like gamification, a good customer satisfaction process, or a closed loop process, or they don't have like a really good self-service chatbot or some sort of tool like that, which one should they focus on first? Or what would you rank in order? Should they do this one first, and then the next one, and then the next one? Should they do all three at the same time, or should they only focus on one?
That's a good question. I think customer satisfaction is kind of the end state, right? I mean, at the end of the day, everything that you're trying to do in most contact centers is to drive customer satisfaction. So you have to think about, how do I do that, right? And I think everything contributes to it, right? I mean, gamification makes happy agents and happy employees who provide better customer service. Providing self-service options to your customers makes your customers happy. All these things kind of add up. I mean, just kind of turning the table and thinking about myself as a customer, I just want my problem solved. So I think having technology that can get me to the right answer the fastest is what I'm most interested in. So a lot of times that's going to be either skills-based routing or what we would call predictive routing, using AI. to find that right agent. Or it could be self-service if it's a simple task to me. So I think it's going to vary a little bit, based on industry, but I think finding a way to get your customer to the right answer the fastest is the first step in increasing that customer satisfaction. And then there's so many different things. We haven't even talked about quality assurance and training and all of that that add on to it as well. But I think, first call resolution, if that's possible, that's really what I think most customers or companies should strive for.
First call resolution and how long it takes, right? The average handle time. As a customer, right? As we all are, and this is what's so great about this industry. And what Artie and I talked about last week was we all have customer experiences from the companies that we buy from. So everyone that we work with, all of our clients, everyone's been a customer. They know what it's like to be treated poorly. They know what it's like to be treated amazingly based off the customer experience with whichever brand you're working with. And that's the beauty of it. So we all know what it takes to make a great company. Then it just comes down to company culture, right? And the top down approach to what's that CEO or what's the C-level pushing out? Is it just churn and burn and just do whatever it takes to make as much revenue as possible and cut corners wherever you can? Or is it more of the approach of, we're going to do what's right by the customer, and yeah, we're going to lose some money on certain things because we have to do credits or we have to do refunds or things like that, but with the long-term goal in mind of this is going to be better for the brand, better for the long term. And I think in today's world with just the social media and cancel culture and everything, it's like you can't make one mistake, otherwise people are going to blast you on social media, which is, that's where we have omni-channel, right? Now we can track social media to fix those when they come up. So we talked a lot about how we're all a customer, right? Like, I know last time Artie and I talked about like what's been a great customer experience we've had, and I'll put that on you is what's a great company that you've worked with, a good example, not a bad one, where you've been wowed by their service and impressed by like how they've treated you as an end user, if you can think of one right away.
You can think of a couple. It's across the board. Gosh, I hate to use the Amazon example, but I'm all about. So there's a book. So if you've ever read The Challenger Sale, which is a book that a lot of salespeople read, I think the third book in that series called The Effortless Experience, and it's all about just make it super easy, for your customer. And, the Amazon example is the first thing that pops in my mind. It's so easy to buy from Amazon. It's so easy to return to Amazon. I'm not a huge fan of a super mega corporation, but there you go. The effortless.
They are not a sponsor of this podcast.
They're not. That's a great book, by the way. And there's 3 in the series, I think. Starts with the Challenger Sale, then there's a customer one that does the effortless experience. Anyway, it's just so damn easy to do business with Amazon. That's why they're taking over the world. I mean, I don't have to waste moments in my day worrying about anything. If I have to do a return, it's 2 mouse clicks, right? And me as a customer, that's what I want. I want easy. I might not get the personal touch. I'm a pretty good researcher online anyway. So that works well for me. Trying to think of any other that are a different size or maybe not a huge corporation that have given a great customer experience.
And while you're thinking about it, shameless plug, in my book, I talk about the frictionless experience.
Not copyrighted?
Not copywritten. I did actually ask Matthew Dixon, who was the author of Effortless Experience, if I could use that term, and he signed off on it. But frictionless experience, and I reference Effortless Experience a bunch in my book. And if you ever want a copy, reach out to me or Alex. We've got probably more copies than we could possibly know what to do with in our garages.
I'll take a copy.
100%.
There you go. We'll deliver it when we go to Lazy Dog. Full circle.
Exactly.
There we go.
Well, that's a good.
About being easy. No, that's the best experience for me.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It comes down to making it easy. I say probably the next one is easy and simple, and then just do what's quick, do what's right, mm-hmm. And that'll solve most 95% of any customer frustration is do what's right and make it easy, right?
I think we've changed our culture over the years. We're now in this Amazon culture where we want it immediately and fast and quick and free shipping and to our door the next day. And we expect that of other things other than physical products to our front door. We expect that we don't want to have to wait on hold, or we don't want to have to talk to an agent for 20 minutes to solve a problem. We just want 10 minutes. We want 2 minutes. We want to just go faster and faster. And it's getting to a point where it's hard for contact centers to deliver that level of expectation for service without going to the cloud, without having these amazing platforms to build upon, to make sure that you have good CSAT scores and you have agent engagement, and they're not getting burnt out because they're having 35 calls that are 3 minutes long, as opposed to 10 years ago they had maybe 10 calls that were an hour long each. It's a different culture, and we have to adapt to it. And I think it's changing a lot. We'll see what the next couple of years brings, but the expectation of customers is immediate, fast, and hopefully free. That's what we're all looking for.
One of the big terms that we're using a lot in Genesis lately is personalization. So we see that's kind of the next evolution, right? I mean, the expectation, like you said, Artie, that if another company can do it and they know who I am and they can treat me as a person and not just as a random inbound call, why can't everyone do it, right? And so the cloud's enabling that. But I think that's definitely what you're going to see across all industries is a personalized experience. We're starting to use the term experience as a service. Just because that's really where it's headed to, because it's not really just the contact center anymore. It's any way that you would interact with a company, and trying to make that experience as seamless, as efficient, as personalized as possible. And that's not just through one piece of technology, right? And that's, kind of to a point Alex made earlier. It's the power of the cloud. You've got this ecosystem. Every business is going to have 9 different cloud products to accomplish their goal, but weaving them together to present that personalized experience. That's really where I see it headed.
Yeah. I remember the last time I went flying, which was actually not too long ago, but it was during the pandemic, and we were talking to the in-laws, and right before the flight, and my in-laws said, how are you going to get your boarding pass? How are you going to get your ticket? Because are there workers there? And I had to think to myself, I was like, I don't remember the last time I got a physical paper airplane ticket. It used to be that, and then it migrated to the kiosk, which was great. And then now it's just check in on your phone. And now it's not even checking on your phone. Like, I get a text message, all I have to do is reply yes, and then I get the boarding pass on my watch. Like, it's like getting easier and easier by, I don't even know, the month. The experiences that we're getting, things are just rapidly growing. And if you said it best, if your competitor can do it and are starting to do it, you should look into it, because you don't want to be left in the dust. You don't want to be that cheapo airline that still forces people to go to a kiosk and they have to show their passport and get a physical printed out paper ticket that the person will lose 3 times before they board the plane.
Yeah, and what used to be
like Spirit
Yes,
well, it used to be
exactly.
It used to be just enterprise could afford those technologies to get that type of experience. What the mid-market and even SMB is missing out on is that it is all available to them too. They just have to get out there, look into it, research it, and take that crawl, walk, run approach to blowing by their competition because of the experience that they can provide their customers. And it's there, no more of the days where, oh man, like, well, Delta can do that, or AT&T can do that, or whomever. Now it's like, oh, we can do that too, right? And there's support systems around them to do that. So, Dave, I'm glad we had a chance to do this and drink a little drink and have a little happy hour on a Thursday.
Thanks for having me.
Dave, I wish we had like 3 hours long of a podcast, because I think we could do this. We could pick your brain forever.
Definitely 3 more installments, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is volume 1 of 5, maybe 6.
I'm not cool, Joe Rogan.
such a pleasure to have you on. Such a wealth of knowledge. You've been in the industry for forever, and you've seen it migrate to the cloud. You've seen these buzzwords. You've seen it all. You've been on both sides, and such a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
You got it. Well, that wraps up the show for today. Thanks for joining, and don't forget to join us next week as we bring another guest in to talk about the trends around cloud contact center and customer experience. Also, you can find us at adleradvisors.com, LinkedIn, or your favorite podcast platform. We'll see you next week on another Cloud Podcast.